Good morning, everyone. So I am recording this session, and today is November 11th. So we are going to begin with understanding what learning is. So the reading which is uploaded for the students on Moodle is this, Chapter 1, What is Learning? So as you can see, these are the highlights of this chapter, and we will be looking at this one by one this week. So this week is focused on understanding what learning is and different ideas and concepts related to learning. And as you scroll down, you will find a few questions given at the end of the chapter. There are about 10 questions. So I will be posting these questions on Moodle, and you are expected to answer these questions and submit it on Moodle. So this will be the assignment. So you will be responding to these questions in a Word doc form and upload it on Moodle. So that will be the assignment for this, what learning is. So let's begin with so I'm going back to my PPT to introduce you to some ideas to what learning is. So as you can see, learning, there are many definitions of learning, though these are quite old one, but these definitions still prevail. In my next class, I will provide to you a definition of learning, or maybe in today's class, I will provide to you a definition of learning given by Anita Woolfolk in her book on educational psychology, for you to have an idea whether her definition. Anita Woolfolk's books are considered as a kind of textbook for what we call for education psychology course. And we are going to use it just what educational psychology is, what learning is actually in this course. So let's look at the first these definitions given here. Then I'll share with you what Anita Woolfolk has written about learning. So Gardner Murphy, as you can see, it is 19. Okay, let's begin with year-wise. This is 1945. Wordsworth, any activity can be called learning so far as it develops the individual in any respect, good or bad, and makes his later behavior and experiences different from what they would otherwise have been. So this is, the focus is activities which are developed by a teacher, someone who is kind of engaged in taking through different individuals in a supervised experience. And the focus of this is to make a certain changes behavior. So make his later behavior and experiences different what they were earlier. So taking someone from point A to point B, and point B, the behavior at point B should be different from the behavior at point A. So if this is the case, whether it is good or bad, that is learning. Another definition in 1946 came out as learning is the modification of behavior through experience. So we have experience here also in 1945 definition, modification of behavior. So it is still, they are continuing with the same idea, experiences, change in behavior. Then 1957, learning is a process by which behavior changed through practice or training. Now, as you see here, the focus has changed a little bit from, it's not only experiences, but it is also what they call process. So the process is where learning is actually changing, and learning changes as a result of different processes or processes which learners go through. So that is what Kingsley and Gary defined learning in 1957. And then in 1968, we have learning the term learning covers every modification in behavior to meet environmental requirements. So all changes, so whether it is, as you remember, just saw in 1945, good or bad. So here it is, all changes, whether good or bad. So as long as far as they bring about change, modification in behavior to meet the environmental requirements. So environmental requirements are to be able to live and survive in a certain environment. So that is learning. For example, we do not need to learn how to hunt because we do not need that kind of skill or knowledge in our society. But in societies where hunting is still the most prevalent or the most commonly used practice, such as in Amazon, in some tribes in Amazon, they rely on hunting or maybe on plants. So they have this kind of experiences or processes designed for the young ones to learn how to hunt and different skills related to hunting. So that is learning according to Murphy. Now, I'm just going to read out to you what Anita Woolfolk said in her latest book on educational psychology, and in the chapter on learning, she says, learning occurs when experience causes a change in a person's knowledge or behavior. So again, she is continuing with the same idea, change in behavior as a result of going through a certain process or processes. Changes simply caused by maturation, illness, fatigue, or hunger. They are excluded so these, the changes which are caused by, as a person grows, matures, a person falls ill, a person, because of certain physical activity or mental activity, person is experiencing fatigue. So that is also certain change. But these changes are not considered as learning, right? So they are excluded from the definition of learning. So that is, so still Anita Woolfolk believes that learning is which occurs as a result of going through a set of experiences, and those set of experiences actually brings about changes in person's knowledge or behavior. So that is what learning is. So this is the latest as per given in Anita Woolfolk's book also. So there is, as you see, there is not much difference here, whether it is 1945 definition as we saw here in the presentation, or the one that I read from Anita Woolfolk's latest book on education, latest edition, not the latest book, but the latest edition of his book on educational psychology. I think this is, I think, is 12th edition of the book, and this is a kind of textbook for education psychology course all over the world. And I studied when I was doing my teaching qualification, I was doing my master's, and people still use this book, and that's why SAGE, they continuously, they publish new editions, because education psychology continues to change. So they keep adding more changes, more information there. So that is learning. Now the second aspect, okay, let's go on to, as you can see, the definition that we saw above, they are looking at change in behavior as a result of experience or practice. So it is important that learning is so far considered as change in behavior. It's important that we keep in mind, we are still looking at learning or defining learning as change in behavior. And this change in behavior is occurring as a result or taking place as a result of going through a certain experience or going through a set of going through a set of exercises designed by someone who is teaching. It could be instructor physically present in the class, or it could be someone online teaching as is the case with most of you, as some of you actually. So that is learning. Now this learning is actually, it says that acquisition of knowledge, and then as we are changing, as we see this change in behavior, is this change in behavior is because of acquisition of knowledge. We are gaining more knowledge. So when we were point A, the what we know was little or less as compared to when we are at point B. So the journey from point A to point B is actually has taken us, or given us, we have acquired more knowledge. And this knowledge is gained through studying or going through certain experiences. Now, of course, knowledge is gained through by reading, but also we gain through by performing different experiments, by observing things. We look at in detail when we come back to different learning theories in the coming weeks. So we gain knowledge because we study. So it could be reading, it could be observation, and then to gain knowledge of or skill in something through study, teaching, instruction, experience. So these are what we say classroom. So some of the changes in behavior are occurring because we are learning many things out of the classroom, and we are also learning knowledge and skills inside the classroom. And then learning is process of gaining knowledge, as it was said, and then a process by which behavior is changed, shaped, or controlled. Now it's important. For example, you have learned how to address a teacher in our Asian context. So we always call teacher. We don't call teacher. We do not by the first name, as is the case in the developed world. So we call them sir, ma'am, madam, or miss, if you remember your school days. But in children in developed countries, they will, even in primary school, they will not call as miss. They will take the name Miss so and so or Mrs. This. And is the case if they are in university, they will call by their first name. So they are not going to, if there is a title to someone, Dr. so and so, so they may call it, but they actually this is actually a certain behavior which is acceptable and learned in that context, and they actually live like that, or they behave in that way. But in our context, we are told not to take our teacher's name. And so when we are referring or talking to someone, we always say sir or ma'am without taking the person's name. So this is also what they call controlled behavior. So the societies or the experiences which are designed for the learners, they are also designed to control some of the behaviors or control learners by bringing about the change that the society thinks should be brought about, and by discouraging the change that society thinks should be discouraged. So they should not learn something, they should not behave in a certain way. So that is there as well. So a process by which behavior is changed, shaped, or controlled. And then the individual process of constructing understanding based on experience from a wide range of sources. So this is also learning that individual is constructing knowledge for himself. So learning is individual as well. So it's not, for example, we are learning this chapter on what learning is, but your learning from this will or has to be individual learning. So we cannot call class learning as student A's learning and student B's learning, because each individual's learning is different. Student A's individual learning about learning is different from student B's learning about learning, what learning is. So that is individual exercise, individual process. Now this will differ as if you can recall our previous week's classes where we looked at individual differences, and we were looking at the cognitive theories, the cognitive development, and the learning theory, learners types and memory and the amount of information, and then intelligences. So if you look at that also, so this will, if you try to fix that, if I bring that information here, each individual, for example, if an individual is not feels that he or she can learn more by viewing, watching videos, then the reading is given here. I am speaking with you. So all this may not help that individual. So what is needed by that individual to watch a certain video where something is presented in animation and learn. Though this is also a video where things are explained. So we are also looking at what we call audio learning, and so you will be engaged in a certain task, as I told you in the beginning, that you will be given some questions and you are going to respond to those questions. So those responses are actually kinesthetic learning, where you're going to write something, construct answers by yourself from the information given in the reading. So that will be part of the kinesthetic learning. So we are in this session, in this module, in this unit, I am going to include all types of learners. So there is audio, visual, and kinesthetic learning. So these are the ideas which are there, which we borrowed from cognitive development. Now, learning, as you can see, continuously keeps saying is change in behavior, and it's important that learning is a continuous and lifelong process. So learning doesn't stop anywhere. If you remember the very first slide, where we said learning is a process and it is positive or it's good or bad. So whatever we are learning, whether it is good, whether it is bad, whether we learn to love, whether we learn to hate, whether we learn to draw, whether we learn to do something, a skill or a knowledge, that is lifelong learning, right? And it doesn't stop at any point. And it's a universal process, right? So wherever you are, you continue learning. So it's not that I'm in Pakistan, so I can learn here. But if I move out of this context, if I'm placed in some other country or in some other context, I will stop learning. So it doesn't happen. So everyone in the world is learning different knowledges and different processes, right? Those learning could be social learning. If we look at that, also could be cognitive learning about the environment, about society, culture, science, math, physics. So all these learnings are taking place at the same time. Then learning is purposive and goal directed. So it's important that if we want to ensure that we have learned what we wanted to learn, then we have to have a goal. So the learning has to be goal directed, and that's why if you remember your school classrooms and even your university classes, so all the courses are divided into maybe chapters or units or modules, and each module or each chapter has a certain focus, as is the case in this course as well. So in the first module, we looked at recalling information related to educational psychology, related to learning, that could help us to understand the information that will be given in this course. So that was the goal. Then in this module, which is module 2, we're looking at what learning is. So there is a goal for whatever we do. So whatever is planned, is designed by an instructor or by someone who is guiding the learning process, is a goal directed activity. And this goal has a purpose in it, right? So each activity has a purpose. So we can't design an activity without a purpose. And whether we have achieved that purpose or whether we have reached that goal will be dependent on your what you can produce and what you can show. In this case, you are going to respond to certain questions, so that those responses will demonstrate your learning, whether the purpose is achieved or the goal is met. And then learning involves reconstruction of experience. So that's an interesting idea, that reconstruction of experiences. Now, as I said, we continuously construct knowledge, individual knowledge. As we are constructing individual knowledge, we keep, if you remember, Piaget's ideas of equilibrium, that our cognition, our brain has to be in equilibrium position, and that is there shouldn't be any confusion related to any concept, or in other words, all information should be placed in appropriate schema or in appropriate file. If we cannot, either we store that information in the already created files and expand the existing schema of files, or we put that information in, create new files. So all this is what we call reconstruction of experience. So as we're engaged in bringing our cognition into equilibrium position, we are actually reconstructing our experiences. So we have learned something, and as new information, new level of skills come in, for example, games, you play video games or some other games, so there are always new level of skills. So when you reach a new level, you need to use earlier learned skill, and you have to learn the skills which are designed for that particular stage. So that is, so you have the new set of skills is based or founded on the earlier learned skills. So that is what they call reconstruction of knowledge and experiences. So you learners continuously engaged in the process of reconstructing what they have learned. It could be knowledge, it could be experiences. And then we have learning is product of activity and environment. That's also an important idea, environment and activity. Now, activity might be interesting activity. Teacher might have planned and brought in lots of resources, but environment is also important here. By environment, we mean what is happening around us, whether we are doing it in a stress-free classroom, in a stress-free environment, or we are doing it where there is where students are stressed. For example, if someone is stressed, someone is emotionally disturbed, that student cannot concentrate or listen. Even the student is listening, but the student is not processing that information in his or her cognition because of the environment, not only in this class, but within ourselves as well. So the activity can only become productive if it is carried out, if it is happening in a conducive, supportive environment. So that environment is normally created by a teacher, which is where there is the students are learning in a kind of environment where there is no threat to them, where they're not where there is no threat of punishment or penalty if they cannot do what teacher is asking them to do. But if there is also a procedure that if they cannot do what teacher is expecting them to do, then this teacher has created what we call, I gave you that word from zone of proximal development. The word is scaffolding. So what they cannot do is actually taught to them in a supported way, step by step. Step one, and they go on, climb onto the next step. Then they complete that particular what we call floor. They go on to the next floor. So the construction is completed on the third floor. Then they move on to the fourth floor. That is how building is constructed. So that idea is also there in learning. And this has to be happen in environment which is free of any intimidation, free of any fear, and students are listening. Now there are few things that teachers cannot control, such as what students are thinking about, what is happening outside the world, outside, maybe at home, outside the campus, or outside the classroom. So those things cannot be controlled by a teacher. But if some or one, or maybe a group of students who are going through some emotional disturbances or events that might have disturbed them, So that is going to affect them. So the only way to make sure that this group of students is also engaged in learning is to look at, maybe try to find out what is disturbing them, and to minimize that particular or that certain fear, whatever is out there, and try to help those to um, concentrate and listen to what is being done in the class. So learning is a product of activity and environment. So if it is conducive environment, supportive environment, then of course students are going to learn more, and they are going to achieve the goal or the objective or the purpose decided by the teacher. So these are the nature and characteristics of learning. So the next is, learning is transferable to one situation to another. So you can transfer, as I said, if you are playing a game, so when you go on to the next stage, you are given a little complex stage. So you have to use more skills, and the new skills that you're going to use in the next stage will be founded on the skills that you have already used in the previous stage or stages. So you're transferring that knowledge from one situation to another. If you are unable to transfer your knowledge, and whether it is knowledge or skills, from one situation to another situation, from one subject to another subject, from science to social sciences, or from life sciences to, let's say, social sciences, then of course you have not learned at all, because you are unable to transfer that learning. So that is also an important idea, and that is why teachers in those who teach social sciences, they always ask questions which might be, for example, education. If you have learned something in psychology, and if you cannot connect that particular concept of psychology in learning theories course, then of course it shows that you have not learned those concepts. And then learning helps in attainment of teaching learning objectives, of course. That is, we are looking at the schools, university, colleges. So there is a certain list of a set of objectives, and experiences planned by teachers are actually aimed to achieve those objectives, attainment, achieving those objectives. So that is also learning, and this learning is shown in the form of maybe assessments, um, uh, planned maybe at school level, class level, or at the board level. Now this is also interesting, that you might have performed well in class or in board, but if you cannot transfer that learning to other situations, then that learning, we will look at that, come in to this aspect in a while. So that is not learning actually, because that learning, you are unable to translate that learning or transfer that learning into a new situation or a new subject. So learning helps in proper growth and development. That's what it is. Say we are learning, that's why we are developing and growing. We are making appropriate choices at every step of our growth. We learn to behave in a certain way when we are 12 years old, and we learn to behave in a certain way when we are 14 or 15 or 16 or 17 or 18 years old. So that is growth and development. Right? And then learning helps in the balanced development of the personality. That's believed that you can only grow up to a balanced individual if you've been learning not only science, physics, academics, but also non-academics, such as religion, society, culture, all those things. So learning helps in proper adjustment in certain environment. For example, if I'm in Pakistan and I behave in a certain way, but if I move to a country such as where maybe Europe, so if I do not follow the pattern, the life pattern or the practices which are used there, for example, if I keep calling my teachers there sir or ma'am, then the teachers over there are going to be annoyed, and they might feel offended that he is not calling me by my name, because people over there, they would like to be called by their name. So I need to be able to adjust properly in certain environments where I am, whether it is knowledge, whether it is skills, but mostly it is, we look at skills. And also it helps in realization of your goals. Whatever your goal is, you might have set a goal, this is what I want to become, after I've completed my university degree. So your university degree course is all planned to achieve a certain goal of your life, to become something, whatever it is. So that is, if you are on that track, on the path, and of course you are learning. If you're not, then you are not learning at all. So learning does not necessarily imply environment. So it doesn't, what we call, it is not dependent on environment. Right? As we said here, environment can hamper, can reduce, can disturb the learning pace, but it cannot stop it, right? So it is not dependent on. So the individual could not learn it today because of certain experience, but the student might be able to learn tomorrow because he or she may not be facing the same situation as was the case with today's class. Right? So that is what we call it. It is independent of environment. The types of learning, as we'll quickly go through it, motor learning is the motor skills. If you remember the cognitive development theory, the stage was the psychomotor. The psychomotor is when we conceive knowledge through our senses, sensory motor stage. So that is, we are learning motor skills, movement skills. So we are not only focusing on crawling and standing, what we are looking at running, physical exercises, climbing, jumping, driving, running, all those are. So actually, we are learning how to coordinate different parts of our bodies. Cricket, badminton, tennis, swimming. So all these are coordination of different limbs, body, legs and arms and feet and all that. So that is motor learning. Then we have verbal learning, there's language learning. So language actually now, of course today we have two types of language. One is the oral language, the other one is the sign language that people use hands and they use fingers to communicate different ideas or words or expressions. So that is also so verbal learning as well. So we speak. Now, some of us may have more vocabulary than the other, right? So we look at it. If you remember our different intelligences type. So one of the intelligence type is word intelligent, people who are good with words, language. So they are the ones who will be learning or faster and quicker when it comes to learning, reading and learning new vocabulary and use of those words. So verbal learning. So we learn, so if you're learning any language, if you're learning any new language, European language or some Mandarin or some other language, and of course, you are using your cognition and you are learning, right? Or you might have learned sign language, right? So we learn symbols, figures, sounds, etc. So those are, then we have concept learning. So it is a form of learning which requires higher order mental processes such as thinking, reasoning, intelligence, etc. So we learn different concepts from childhood. For example, we learn about plants in class 1. Plant makes food from what they call sun. Now, as we grow older, when we're in class 9, 10, or 6, 7, then we come across the process of photosynthesis. Now, photosynthesis is an abstract idea. So this is what they are saying. Concept of learning is that learners are able to think, reason, and intelligently make use of abstract concepts and ideas which they have been seeing. I saw plants growing, I saw plants leaves, and now I see autumn, so the plants leaves are falling. In spring they will again come up. So if I am able to if I'm able to make sense of what is happening and why it is happening, then of course I'm using my higher order thinking skills, right? I'm not using my lower order thinking skill, which is recalling level, memorizing and recalling, but this is higher order where I'm thinking, I'm attaching it with a lot of others concepts such as why do the leaves are small in this part of the world? Why do plants are broad and they are not tall, right? So those ideas will also go with my idea of the plants that I see around this, maybe on the campus or outside the campus, along the canal or the roads that I travel. So the plants are different kinds, but if you are traveling in northern areas, then you might see different kind of plants, and then you are able to connect, okay, the environment, the soil is this, so the plants are like this. There must be connection between the soil, the environment, and the plant types, the leaves of the plants, the fruits. So that is the case, what we call higher order thinking or higher order mental processes, where you are thinking, reasoning, and you are developing your concepts. Discrimination learning, this is, I think that's, let's stop here. We'll continue. Okay, we still have 3-4 minutes. So discrimination learning is learning to differentiate between stimuli. So stimuli is which is outside. We will learn about more about it when we come on to behavioral perspective of learning. So stimuli and showing an appropriate response. So stimulus and response is, if you remember the Russian biologist Ivan Pavlov, so that his experiment is quite famous for that. So stimulus and response. So whatever our response is, it is because of a certain stimuli or stimulus outside us in the environment. So our response is actually because of that stimuli or stimulus, right? They have given example here, so we are able to discriminate learning horns of different vehicles like bus, car, ambulances, etc. For example, if you're driving and you see an ambulance, and if you hear ambulance horn, then of course you have a habit of moving your vehicle away so that the ambulance can pass. Of course, unfortunately, many of us don't do here in Pakistan, but that is the concept in developed world. But if you see a bus doing it, you will not move away, right? So you will ask, so you, by not moving away or going into another lane, you are telling the bus that the driver has to wait because you are there, you are before him, and your right is the first right. But if it is an ambulance, then you know that ambulance has the first right to go, right? So that is what we call discrimination learning. So you are discriminating between different situations. Then there are learning principles also, such as principles related to science, mathematics, grammar, language, for example. You know that if you want to, listen to this one, so mostly we have been talking in present tense or past tense, right? So this is also, so consciously, where I need to use present tense, I use past tense, and where I need to use present tense, I use present tense. So where I need to use past tense, I use past tense. So that is, on my part, I am aware of certain principles of present tense and past tense. What kind of word do I need to use? What is the sentence structure? So if I'm talking about mathematics, I know how addition is done. If it is what we call, if I need to use BODMAS, I know what is the first function I need to do. So I go step by step. So I cannot perform the fourth function, which is the division in BODMAS. Then of course I can perform division first and then go on to other functions later. So that is what we call learning of principles. So let's stop here. Thank you very much. And write your name and ID number here.